lacking confidence in its candidate, that its candidate could win in a fair election at the voting booth, the DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. Each time that our volunteers.
But of course, they say that there's no such thing and nothing to see here. That's not happening. Go away.
Turned in those towering boxes of signatures needed to get on the ballot. The DNC dragged us into court, state after state, attempting to erase their work and to subvert the will of the voters who had signed those petitions. It deployed DNC-aligned judges to throw me and other candidates off the ballot and to throw President Trump in jail. It ran a sham primary.
You know, I've been voting since I was 18 years old. Matter of fact, the first candidate that I ever voted for president was Ross Perot, because even then I had that whole third party mentality. Even then, I like to think there was a time where I was a pretty dyed-in-the-wool Republican for a little bit, but it took a while for that whole more conservative but yet still politically independent mentality to take hold.
It was rigged to prevent any serious challenge to President Biden. Then, when a predictably bungled debate performance precipitated the palace coup against President Biden, the same shadowy DNC operatives appointed his successor, also without an election.
Key term, appointed. Since when the hell do we appoint our candidates? We don't. We vote, we choose them through the primary process. And I don't understand why folks who identify as Democrats or liberals, why they're not up in arms about this. Why are they just, if they're so concerned about democracy and the democratic process, why are they just laying down and taking this? They're not only laying down, but they're cheering for it. You know, it reminds me of that quote in Star Wars, something along the lines of, "This is how democracy dies, with thunderous applause." That's kind of what I'm getting from Democrats these days.
They installed a candidate who was so unpopular with voters that she dropped out in 2020 without winning a single delegate. My uncle and my father both relished debate. They prided themselves on their capacity to go toe-to-toe with any opponent. And
don't you think it's funny that right now, it was recently that Kamala Harris was, she was dogging Trump at one of her events about him being too scared to debate her. Then immediately when it's time for the first debate to come, you know, I think it's going to be on September 4th, as that's starting to get closer and closer, she backs out of it. The woman is not taking interviews. She's not addressing the nation. She will not speak outside of any event that is not perfectly tailored and nicely put together to frame her in the best light possible. I think even if you're the most dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, if you are the most purple-haired of liberals, I think you have to have some suspicion that Kamala Harris just ain't it.
Battle over ideas. They would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days. This is profoundly undemocratic. How are people to choose when they don't know whom they are choosing? And how can this look to the rest of the world? My father and my uncle were always conscious of America's image abroad because of our nation's role as the template for democracy, the role model for democratic processes, and the leader of the free world. Instead of showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based upon, well, nothing. No policies, no interviews, no debates, only smoke and mirrors.
And to this very moment, she still does not have a single policy listed on her website. The first thing that pops up is a little blurb begging you for money. You have to click past that to get to the website. No platform to be found. Over a month in. Not one stated policy. Oh well, except for that whole price fixing deal, that Soviet era policy that worked so well for the Soviet Union and its people and didn't cause long breadlines and starvation at all. I think she right now, well, I don't think, I mean, I pretty well know, and I'm not the only one thinking this because I'm hardly the sharpest knife in the drawer, but she doesn't really have a core. She doesn't have a platform. Right now, her platform is just trying to figure out whatever sounds the best on paper to get her the most votes, to get her where she wants to be. Whatever she ends up saying her platform is, if she ever does say, it's not going to be sincere. I guarantee you that. I don't think there's a sincere bone in Kamala's body unless you call oh, what's his face? Uh, anyway, I was going to go to a very dirty joke, and that would have been in poor taste.
Balloons in a highly produced Chicago circus. There in Chicago, a string of Democratic speakers mentioned Donald Trump 147 times just on the first day. Who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate? In contrast, at the RNC.
Isn't that a hell of a policy or a hell of a platform to stand on? We're not him. They're weird. Yeah.
The convention, President Biden was mentioned only twice in 4 days. I do interviews every day. Many of you have interviewed me. Anybody who asks gets to interview me. Some days I do as many as 10. President Trump, who actually was nominated and won an election, also does interviews daily. How did the Democratic Party choose a candidate that has never done an interview or debate during the entire election cycle? We know the answers. They did it by weaponizing the government agencies. They did it by abandoning democracy. They did it by suing the opposition and by disenfranchising American voters. What most alarms me isn't how the Democratic Party conducts its internal affairs or runs its candidates. What alarms me is the resort to censorship and media control and the weapon.
I mean, yeah, if you think a party that's fully behind price fixing and censorship on social media platforms and weaponizing the three-letter agencies against their opposition, they're pretty damn totalitarian.
Organization of the federal agencies. When a U.S. president colludes with or outright coerces media companies to censor political speech, it's an attack on our most sacred right of free expression. And that's the very right upon which all of our other constitutional rights rest. President Biden mocked Vladimir Putin's 88% landslide in the Russian elections, observing that Putin and his party controlled the Russian press and that Putin prevented serious opponents from appearing on the ballot.
Pot, meat, kettle.
But here in America, the DNC also prevented opponents from appearing on the ballot. And our television networks expose themselves as Democratic Party organs. Over the course of more than a year, in a campaign where my poll numbers reached at times in the high 20s, the DNC-aligned mainstream media networks maintain a near perfect embargo on interviews with me. During his 10-month presidential campaign in 1992, Ross Perot gave 34 interviews on mainstream networks.
And I still say that had not Perot done that little deal where he dropped out and then dropped back in, I think the man stood a very, very good chance of actually winning, barring them having him just have him done Clinton style.
In contrast, during the 16 months since I declared, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and CNN combined gave only 2 live interviews from me. Those networks instead ran a continuous deluge of hit pieces with inaccurate, often vile, pejoratives, and defamatory smears.
which I guarantee you are just now beginning, because now that he is aligned with Trump, whatever positive thoughts they had about him before, he's fixing to be a racist, a misogynist, a homophobe, a transphobe. He's going to be against the Constitution, against democracy. He's just going to be made out to be literally Hitler. Mark my words.
Some of those same networks and colluded with the DNC to keep me off the debate stage. Representatives of those networks are in this room right now, and I'll just take a moment to ask you to consider the many ways that your institutions have abdicated this really sacred responsibility, the duty of a free press to safeguard democracy and to challenge always the party in power. Instead of maintaining that posture of fear, skepticism toward authority, your institutions have made themselves government mouthpieces and stenographers for the organs of power. You didn't alone cause the devolution of American democracy, but you could have prevented it. The Democratic Party's censorship of social media was even more of a naked exercise of executive power. This week, a federal judge, Terry Doty, upheld my injunction against President Biden, calling the White House's censorship project, quote, the most egregious violation of the First Amendment in the history of the United States of America. Doty's previous 155-page decision details how just 37 hours after he took the oath of office, swearing to uphold the Constitution, President Biden and his White House opened up a portal and then invited the CIA, the FBI, CISA, which is a censorship agency. It's the center of the censorship industrial complex, DHS, the IRS, and other agencies to censor me and other political dissidents on social media. Even today, users who try to post my campaign videos to Facebook or YouTube get messages that this content violates community standards. 2 days after Judge Doty rendered his decision this week, Facebook was still attaching warning labels to an online petition calling on ABC to include me in the upcoming debate. They said that violates community standards, their community standards. The mainstream media was once the guardian of the First Amendment and
Now they are its greatest enemy, hands down.
democratic principles, and has joined this systemic attack on democracy.
Because they don't care about democracy, they care about power for themselves and for their oligarch overlords.
It also, the media justifies their censorship on the grounds of combating misinformation.
No, what it is they're trying to prevent truth. Because what they have us convinced, at least an unhealthy number of us, is that any narrative outside of the ones they spin is just categorically untrue.
But governments and oppressors don't censor lies. They don't fear lies. They fear the truth, and that's what they censor. And I don't want any of this to sound like a personal complaint, because it's not. For me, it's all part of a journey, and it's a journey that I signed up with. But I need to make these observations because I think they're critical for us doing the thing that we need to do as citizens in a democracy to assess where we are in this country and what our democracy still looks like, and the assumptions about U.S. leadership around the globe. And are we living up? Are we really still a role model for democracy in this country? Or have we made it, a kind of a joke? And here's the good news. While mainstream outlets denied me a critical platform, they didn't shut down my ideas, which have especially flourished among young voters and independent voters, thanks to the alternative media. Many months ago, I promised the American people that I would withdraw from the race if I became a spoiler. A spoiler is someone who will alter the outcome of the election, but has no chance of winning.